Gunfire cracked like thunder in the narrow Afghan valley. 8 Navy SEALs were trapped, pinned from 3 sides, blood soaking into the dust as machine gun fire shredded the only cover they had left. A rusted Soviet-era BTR. Over the radio, the task force commander's warning cut like a knife. "That little girl you sent us better not slow my SEALs down, or their blood is on your hands." But what no one knew was that salvation was already waiting. Prone on a distant ridgeline nearly a kilometer away, Staff Sergeant Kira Vulov, U.S. Army sniper, lay perfectly still behind the glass of her Schmidt & Bender scope. Her trigger finger hovered, her breathing steady. She had been ordered not to fire, to simply observe and report. Now, through the crosshairs, she saw the truth unfold. Taliban fighters pouring into the kill zone, one of them leveling an RPG toward the pinned-down SEALs. 20 seconds stood between life and death. Keir knew hesitation meant coffins draped in flags. Pride in politics had tied her hands, but her father's words echoed in her mind. Pride kills more soldiers than bullets. She exhaled and made her choice. Long before the Valley of Afghanistan, Kira Vulov's story began on the wide-open plains of Montana. Her father, Viktor Vulov, had once been a Soviet biathlon champion, a man who defected in 1991 with nothing but his rifle skills and a dream of freedom. He opened a small precision shooting school for law enforcement, and that range became Kira's childhood playground. While other kids played with dolls, Kira learned to read the wind. Her father would stand behind her, adjusting her stance with quiet authority. "The bullet listens to the math," he told her. "You calculate drop, spin, drift. Then you trust your breath." By the age of 16, she was striking steel at 1,000 yards with frightening consistency. By 18, she enlisted in the Army, her eyes set on Special Forces candidacy. But that door was closed to women. Rebuffed, she chose the infantry, grinding through grueling training until she earned a slot at the Army Sniper School at Fort Benning. Against every expectation, she graduated as Distinguished Honor Graduate, top of her class. The recognition, however, was poisoned with whispers. Diversity hire, political correctness, token female. Kira silenced them the only way she knew, through the scope. In Syria, she logged 43 confirmed kills, including a single 1,800-meter shot that stopped a suicide vehicle before it could destroy an entire convoy. The Green Berets who witnessed it started calling her the Ghost. But every new unit meant starting over. Every new commander doubted her. Every mission forced her to prove, again and again, that her place was not charity, but earned. And each time, she carried her father's words like a creed. A sniper has no ego, only purpose. The Hindu Kush Mountains looked deceptively calm that morning. Pale sunlight stretched across ridges scarred by decades of war. From her perch nearly a kilometer away, Kira Vulov knew better. The silence wasn't peace. It was camouflage. 14 hours she had been prone on the ridgeline, motionless except for the slow rhythm of her breath. Every detail of the valley below had already been mapped into her range card. The curve of the wadi, the ruined Soviet BTR, the outcroppings where a fighter might hide. She had marked them all, waiting. Then the patterns began to shift. Through her Schmidt & Bender scope, she noticed the birds first. A small flock startled from a tree line just north of the compound, scattering wildly. Seconds later, she caught a glint. Sunlight bouncing off glass, perhaps a scope. far too deliberate to be random. She adjusted her magnification. A silhouette crouched, then vanished. Her instincts sharpened. She keyed her radio softly. Chaos Overwatch, eyes on possible movement north grid. Break. Possible Overwatch positions occupied. The response came back clipped and annoyed. Noted. Stay in observation only. Out. Kira tightened her jaw. They weren't listening. Again. Minutes passed, and then came the sound she dreaded. Distant engines, muffled but moving. Dust plumes rose faintly from the east. Her trained eye could tell, not civilians. The formation was disciplined, too organized. Fighters, and plenty of them. Still, the SEAL team pushed forward, unaware. She watched Chief Harrison's unit enter the very choke point she had warned about at the briefing. Narrow walls boxed them in. Above, movement flickered. Shadows on ridgelines. Too many to count. Her heart pounded, though her hands stayed steady on the rifle. She whispered to herself, almost prayer-like, "It's starting." Over the net, Harrison's confident voice broke in, steady but blind to the trap. Neptune moving, all clear. But in Kira's scope, nothing was clear. She could see what they couldn't. The invisible net drawing tight around them, the enemy closing from 3 directions. And then, the first muzzle flash lit up the ridgeline. The ambush had begun. The first burst of gunfire was deafening. PKM machine guns opened up from both ridgelines, streams of 7.62 tracers stitching across the wadi like fiery whips. Dirt and stone erupted around the SEALs as they scrambled for cover. The rusted BTR-60, already a skeleton of steel, clanged with the impact of hundreds of rounds. It would not hold long. Kira's heart slammed once against her ribs, then steadied. Her scope told her the truth. This wasn't a random skirmish. This was a kill box, perfectly prepared. 3 positions, interlocking fields of fire, each one chosen to funnel Neptune element into the slaughter. Exactly the scenario she had warned about, and exactly what Chief Harrison had ignored. She watched Rodriguez, blood streaming from his shoulder, drag another SEAL behind the wreckage. Another man, leg shredded, tightened a tourniquet with shaking hands and drew his pistol, firing desperately into the canyon walls. They were fighting ghosts, enemies they couldn't even see. On her radio, Harrison's voice cut through the chaos, arrogant even under fire. "Chaos Overwatch, negative engagement. We're handling it. Stay off this net." Her jaw clenched. Pride. Pride was going to kill them all. Then she saw it. Movement on the left flank. A fighter with an RPG, sprinting into position, angling for a clear shot at the trapped Americans. In 20 seconds, the blast would reduce the BTR, and everyone behind it, to ash. Her orders rang in her head. Observe only. Do not fire. But her rules of engagement also echoed. Engage to protect U.S. forces in imminent danger. Kira's father's voice returned to her. Pride kills more soldiers than bullets. A sniper has no ego, only purpose. She found her breathing rhythm. Inhale. Exhale. Hold. The world narrowed to the crosshairs and the heartbeat between. 4 pounds of trigger pressure. The rifle bucked, the suppressed crack echoing off the valley walls. 1.2 seconds later, the RPG gunner folded, weapon clattering harmlessly to the dirt. But Kira did not stop to celebrate. Her reticle swung to the PKM on the ridgeline. Squeeze. Impact. Another fighter collapsed. Then another, then another. Each shot timed with the rhythm of her pulse. Every movement precise. Inevitable. In 11 seconds, 6 men were dead. Down below, the SEALs froze in confusion, realizing someone unseen was striking with deadly precision. Over the net, Harrison shouted in fury, "Who's engaging? Identify yourself!" Kira ignored him. Her focus locked forward. More insurgents spilled into the canyon, 15, maybe more, disciplined and coordinated. This was no ragtag militia. This was the Haqqani network. For the SEALs, it was chaos. For Kira, it was mathematics made physical. Angles, distances, breath, purpose. And as the bodies began to fall, the legend of the ghost was reborn. The valley had become a furnace of noise and fire. The Haqqani fighters surged forward with terrifying coordination, bounding in twos and threes, suppressing, then flanking. Their discipline marked them as something far deadlier than local insurgents. Kira slipped into what shooters call the zone. Time stretched and contracted, her body becoming a machine of rhythm and calculation. Bolt back, new round chambered, breath steady, trigger squeeze, impact. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was executing. 800 meters. A PKM gunner ducked behind a rock outcrop. She calculated the angle, held for drift, and sent a round straight through the stone, the bullet tearing him from cover. 750. Two fighters advancing side by side, AKs spitting fire. 2 shots, 3 seconds apart. Both collapsed into the dust. But the enemy adapted. They began probing for her position, firing blindly at the ridgeline, sending sprays of dirt and stone over her prone body. One RPG screamed overhead, detonating far behind her in a thunderous roar. Kira didn't flinch. She knew the terrain better than they did. 14 hours of silent study had paid off. A fighter dove into a shallow ditch, thinking himself safe. Kira had marked that exact depression, memorized the angles. She skipped around off a slanted rock face. The ricochet arced into the ditch. Silence followed. On the radio, Petty Officer Marcus Williams, now in command after Harrison's wound, called out, "Chaos Overwatch. We cannot move without your suppression. Keep them off us." "Roger," she replied coldly. "Keep moving. I've got you." Her magazine ran dry. She swapped it in 3 seconds flat, never breaking the cycle. 23 rounds fired, 21 confirmed kills. The survivors finally broke, retreating toward the compound. The valley fell quiet, except for the groans of the wounded and the hum of approaching Blackhawks. The SEALs were alive, because she had refused to stay silent. The battlefield grew quiet, but it was not peace. Smoke hung in the valley, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with blood and dust. The SEALs moved with urgency, dragging the wounded toward the incoming Blackhawks. Rotor blades thundered overhead, scattering debris, as medics leapt out to receive the casualties. Kira remained on her ridge, calm, methodical, cleaning her rifle as if nothing extraordinary had happened. To her, it was duty, not glory. Yet the men she had saved looked up often toward her position, realizing the truth. Their survival had come from a soldier they had doubted, dismissed, even mocked. Petty Officer Marcus Williams was the first to speak over the net, his voice carrying both gratitude and disbelief. "Chaos Overwatch. Need to know who to thank." Kira hesitated, then keyed her mic. "Staff Sergeant Kira Vulov, U.S. Army Sniper School, attached to Task Force Chaos." A pause. Then Williams, softer now. "Jesus Christ. Vulov, you saved our lives." When Harrison, bandaged and pale, finally approached her later at the fob, he stood in silence for a long moment. The arrogance was gone, stripped away by the reality of what he had witnessed. "I was wrong," he admitted quietly. "In 12 years with this team, I've never seen shooting like that. Kira looked up from her rifle at last. It was never about being the finest, Chief. It was about bringing you home. That exchange spread faster than any official report. Within weeks, whispers ran through special operations circles. Never tell Vulov she can't do something. The SEALs themselves repeated it, like a mantra, half in jest, half in reverence. For Kira, the real aftermath was quieter. She declined the public Silver Star ceremony, asking for the paperwork to be filed quietly. But she could not stop the story from escaping. It reached Washington. It reached the Pentagon. And it reached every operator who had ever questioned whether a woman could belong at their side in combat. The SEALs no longer looked at her as an outsider. They looked at her as what she had always been. One of them. News of the firefight spread faster than official channels could contain it. At first, it was just whispers among operators rotating through Bagram and Kandahar. Did you hear about the Army sniper who saved an entire SEAL team? Then it became something larger. A story that grew with every retelling. The SEALs themselves fueled it. Men who had once dismissed her as a poster child now carried a new mantra. Never tell Vulov she can't do something. It wasn't just respect. It was reverence, born of survival. They had looked into death's mouth, and the only reason they had walked away was because of her. Within weeks, Task Force Chaos couldn't move anywhere without someone asking about the ghost. Pilots repeated her name. Green Berets swapped details of her 1,800-meter kill in Syria with fresh awe. Even Marines hardened by Fallujah admitted quietly that her shooting had set a new bar. Colonel Mitchell submitted a Silver Star recommendation, and though Kira refused a public ceremony, the paperwork could not stay hidden. The Pentagon took notice. Quietly, doctrine began to shift. Guidance now allowed, even encouraged, qualified female snipers to embed with Tier 1 units. But legends are never just about policy. They are about myth. In chow halls and briefing rooms, her story took on a life of its own. Some claimed she'd dropped 30 enemies. Others swore she had never missed a shot. The numbers blurred, but the essence remained. One woman, alone on a ridge, had turned certain death into survival. For Kira, it was almost uncomfortable. She hadn't sought glory, only duty. But legends rarely ask permission. And so, across Afghanistan, a name began to echo in hushed tones. The ghost of the Hindu Kush. Legends fade quickly in war zones, but not hers. After the ambush in the Hindu Kush, Kira stayed in Afghanistan for 2 more tours. Each one carved deeper lines into her life, testing not just her skills, but her endurance, her resolve, and her soul. On her second deployment, she was no longer the ghost in the shadows no one trusted. This time, she was requested by name. Units that had once doubted her now fought over her assignment. Put Vulov on Overwatch, they demanded. She sees what we don't. But, with recognition, came burden. Every mission carried an unspoken expectation that she would once again perform the impossible. When a convoy rolled into a valley, commanders looked to her to spot the trap. When night raids kicked off, they asked her to predict where the counterattack would come. She lived under the weight of their silent faith, and she bore it with the same quiet focus that had defined her from the start. Her kills mounted. Confirmed numbers in the dozens. Insurgents spoke of an unseen shooter who punished any attempt at ambush. To them, she became a ghost story told around campfires. To her comrades, she was a shield. But the third tour was different. It wasn't just about skill anymore. It was about survival against attrition. Weeks of operations without rest, 14-hour watches that turned into 20. Nights where she held her scope steady even as exhaustion blurred her vision. There were close calls too. Mortar shells that cratered just meters away, RPGs that slammed into walls she used for cover. Each brush with death tempered her like steel. Her reflexes sharpened, her instincts honed. Yet inside she grew quieter, more reserved. The more she gave, the more she carried. The faces of the men she had saved, and the shadows of the ones she could not. When her third tour ended, even the SEALs who had once mocked her lined up to shake her hand, not because she was a woman who had defied expectations, but because she had endured alongside them, mission after mission, never breaking, never faltering. She was no longer simply the ghost. She was something rarer, a constant. A warrior who had proven over and over that purpose mattered more than pride. Wars rarely end with victory alone. They leave behind scars, visible and invisible. For Kira, the ambush in the Hindu Kush had secured her place in military legend. But the years that followed revealed a darker truth. No hero escapes unscathed, and no unit walks free from tragedy forever. Her second and third tours built her reputation, but they also cost her dearly. Friends she had fought beside on her first deployment were gone by the time she returned. Victims of IED strikes, ambushes, and the relentless grind of counterinsurgency. Some names were read at memorial services. Some vanished into silence with no story to tell. Kira carried each loss like another round in her pack. She could still see Rodriguez, the SEAL she had watched bleeding behind the BTR, who later died from wounds on another mission. She remembered Torres, her supervisor, who had defended her at the briefing, killed in a mortar attack in Helmand. The chain of tragedies lengthened with every passing year, and though her legend grew, so did the burden of survival. Yet legacy is not just measured in the fallen. Her story reshaped doctrine. By the end of her third tour, the Army and JSOC had begun formally integrating female snipers into Overwatch elements. Young soldiers, male and female alike, looked to her record as proof that skill, not gender, defined a warrior. Still, in the quiet of night, medals meant little. Kira wrote in her journal, "Words never meant for the public. I inherited my father's lessons, but I did not inherit his peace. Every shot I took saved lives and stole pieces of myself. Legacy is not the glory they tell. It is the weight you carry when the shooting stops." The SEALs had a saying now: never tell Vulov she can't do something. It was half joke, half truth, but entirely respect. For them, her legacy was survival. For Kira, it was the haunting reminder that survival always came at a price. The war did not stop for legends. Afghanistan burned on, with new missions, new casualties, and new scars. For Staff Sergeant Kira Vulov, the tours ended eventually, but the story did not. It traveled further than she ever imagined, whispered among soldiers, retold in Pentagon briefings, and even adapted into unofficial training examples. Yet when asked about her legacy, Kira always shrugged. "I wasn't there to become a story. I was there to bring people home." To her, that was the only measure of success. Not medals, not headlines, lives. In time, she returned stateside. She lived quietly, avoiding interviews, slipping back into the shadows she had mastered overseas. She kept her father's old rifle, cleaned it every Sunday, and taught local police cadets about wind, distance, and discipline. To them, she was an instructor. To the ones who knew her record, She was a living reminder that extraordinary courage could come from the most unexpected places. But the battlefield never truly left her. Some nights, she still woke with the echo of gunfire in her ears. In her journal, she wrote, "War is not glory. It is the stubborn refusal to let the person next to you die. Every shot I took was a prayer disguised as mathematics." Her story became a message carried across generations of warriors. That purpose must always be stronger than pride. That skill has no gender. And that silence can be deadlier than noise. The SEALs she had saved never forgot. At reunions and memorials, they spoke of the ghost of the Hindu Kush with a reverence that no rank or medal could buy. And young soldiers, male and female alike, drew strength from her defiance of every limitation imposed on her. In the end, her greatest act was not the shots she fired, but the truth she left behind. That one person, steady and unflinching, can change the fate of many. That was her gift. That was her message.